In this video lesson, we're going to show you how to create the illusion of cricketing clones by cutting different images out from separate source images and layering them together in a single Photoshop document to produce this multiplicity effect. Let me have a look at the layers palette for you, and you can see here that we've got a variety of different keepers and batsmen on different layers, and as I turn them on and off you can see them appear and disappear. There's one in the distance there just coming and going. And the cool thing is, if I turn off the background layer, you can see that these guys are actually very quickly and rough and readily selected using a brush on a mask. Because the background is identical in every image, it doesn't really matter if we have some background pixels around the cricketer, because when you turn on the main background, then it merges perfectly. So that means you can select these guys and add them to the image very quickly. The only guy that we had to select more effectively and more carefully is the main catcher, because in his original position he was actually blocking out some of the other cricketers in the background. But that's cool, because what you're going to do is learn some advanced selection techniques to capture some fine details like these bits of hair here, and also a bit of motion blur on the fingers too. So that's quite cool. If you need to reposition one of your clones, you can actually select them more effectively. But the masking technique is the main thing we're going to look at, and it's a very quick way to take these guys from the separate source images. Let's have a look at some of them. We've got him to pose with the camera locked off, so that nothing is changing apart from the position and pose of the guy. There he is in the background as a fielder. There's another fielder, and fielder 3 is jumping into the air. And then, because the background doesn't change and everything's locked off, we can combine these guys very quickly and very easily using our layer masks. And I'll show you how to do that now. So let's kick off by opening fielder3.jpg, and what we need to do is make sure we've got the layers palette open. So go to window layers, and here's our main locked background layer. So if you double click to unlock it, you can call this one fielder3. It's always a good idea to label your layers, because then you know which document they came from, and it's easier to identify them in the layers palette when you've got loads of them. Once you've relabeled the layer, go to File, Open, and browse to keeper.jpg, which is also on our video disk, and then we're going to select this and add it to our main layer document, which is going to be Fielder 3. So to select this, you go to Select All, and then go to Edit Copy, to copy it into the computer's clipboard, and then pop up to Fielder 3, and if you go to Edit Paste, it will appear as a new layer on top of Fielder 3. So I can turn that layer off, and you can see we've got Fielder 3 jumping in the air. Turn layer 1 on again, and there is our new cricketer. Let's label this one as well by double clicking just on the text here, and we're going to call this one the same as the file name. This is keeper. So at the moment the keeper's background is blocking out the entire layer below, so what we're going to do is create a layer mask and just reveal the bits that we want to see, i.e. the keeper himself. So to create a mask, what I'm going to do is click here on the Add Layer Mask icon. There we go, and a white mask appears, and white on a mask makes the entire layer 100% solid. So what we need to do is turn this black to hide everything to start with. So click on the mask. If you then press Ctrl and I to inverse the mask, or if you're on a Macintosh, you can press Command and I and it will do the same job. So the mask is now turned black, which makes this layer transparent, revealing the layer below. We can now hit Tab to get the floating windows up. I like Tab because it hides things and reveals them depending on whether I need them or not. And grab the brush tool, and what we need to do is choose a nice soft brush like this one here with a size of around about 300 pixels or so. Make sure it's 100% solid, and then click on the mask to target it, and make sure that you've got a white foreground color. And when you've got your white brush clicked on the mask, you can then spray over the position where this cricketer is on the keeper layer, and it will reveal him quite nicely there. And it doesn't matter if you're revealing bits of edge, because it's the same background in both shots. So the only thing that's changing here is this cricketer. We can turn him on and off, and you can see how easy it is to add him to the multiplicity scene. And just to give you an idea of what's going on here, let me just turn Fielder 3 off, and that's the only thing we can see from this top keeper layer. So that's a very simple and quick and effective way to combine the shots together. Let me do it again just to get you into the swing of things. We go to File, Open, and browse to Batsman. Up pops the Batsman image. Here it comes. And here he is in this pose. So what we're going to do is select this by going to Select All, then choose Edit Copy. You can use keyboard shortcuts as well, like Command C or Control C, depending on Mac or PC. Click on Copy, and then I'm going to use Control Tab, which is a nice keyboard shortcut to toggle between the documents. I'm going to toggle again until we get our main layer document, and Control V, Command V, or Edit Paste will add a new layer to the scene. And this one here is going to be Batsman, so let's just type in batsman on our little label. I'm going to pop that on top just to keep a nice layer stack here. And again, we're going to add a mask to the batsman layer by clicking on the Add Layer Mask icon. Click on the mask, press Ctrl and I to invert it, and then grab the trusty brush tool and then spray on the area. You can see in the thumbnail where he is roughly, so if you just click and spray, that should add him quite effectively. Now this guy here, let me just Ctrl plus to zoom in a few times and then hold the spacebar down to get the hand tool. I can reposition things temporarily, there we go. Make sure you add his shadow, because we've got a flash gun pointing in from the left here. Make sure you've added the shadow as well, and click and spray to include all of him. Now if you accidentally go too far, you're going to start making this area solid and you're going to be masking out bits on the background layer. So what you can do is swap the foreground and background colors around by clicking here, and then if we put a black brush over this bit here, we can make this top corresponding pixel look completely transparent again. So black and white hides or shows things on the layer mask. Let me turn these two layers off, and you can see now which bits we're seeing from the batsman layer. And of course, if I carry on spraying with my black brush, we can remove some of those areas, or if I go to a white brush, we can add them again, just to make sure we've got all of the shadow. Okay, turn everything else on, and you can see how we're building up our layered multiplicity document bit by bit. I'm going to just move the layers palette to the right here, and I'm just going to modify it slightly by going to this option, go down to panel options, and then you can change the thumbnail size to a smaller one, and we can fit more things into our screen. So click OK to apply the change. We can also now read our names at the side here, so we can see the labels more clearly. I can now push that back to this position, and we're ready to add our next image to the shot. And the next chap we want is the bowler. So let's go to File, Open, and Browse to Bowler, and double click to open it up. Here it comes, and what we'll do is we'll just use keyboard shortcuts for speed here. There he is in the corner. Control A to select all, Control C to copy, Control Tab to jump back to our main layered document. There it is, and Control V adds the bowler like so. It always says layer 1 there, so again, good housekeeping. Label your layers as you add them, and that will make life a lot easier later on. So there's my bowler. He's hiding in the corner there. Let me just hit space to get the hand tool, and we can see him. And we need to add a mask to him. We need to click on the mask, Control I, and then grab the trusty brush tool by pressing B or clicking here, and then a quick spray with a white brush will of course add the bowler to the frame. So very quickly you get into a nice flow with your layer masks and your copying and your pasting and your brush tip editing. And there we have our layer mask with the bowler. Let me just alt click on the mask. It's cool to be able to see the mask directly. You could even paint on it directly if you want to by alt clicking, and then click back on the main thumbnail here to see the layer as a whole. If I grab the zoom tool by pressing Z and then right click, I can choose fit on screen, hit tab to hide the floating windows, and then see the shot building up nicely. I've jumped forward in time now because we're getting into quite a repetitive section, and I've added Fielder, which is this guy here, and I've used a mask to reveal him. I've also added Fielder 2, who's right in the background there, and if you can't quite work out where he is and don't know where to spray once you've hidden him, then shift click on the mask and a cross will appear, and it will temporarily disable the mask, and you can say, aha, there he is. Click again to turn the mask on and spray over the area where you spotted the fielder. It's a bit like Where's Wally? There he is. Okay, here's Tab to hide the windows, and here's all of our main guys in the shot. We're now ready to add the big catching cricketer in the foreground. So go to File, Open, and browse to Catcher before .jpg. But don't copy and paste this into the main layer, because it won't actually work using the masking technique. Let me just demonstrate why it won't work by actually applying a mask to my version of Catcher here, but don't add this as a separate layer. I'm just going to show you by spraying white. We can reveal him as usual, but because he's the only cricketer that's overlapping other guys in the scene, we're actually losing bits of them when we add him, because his bits of background are hiding the guys on the layers below, as you can see here. So he's much more difficult to select using the masking technique. So what we need to do is just trash that, go back to the main Catcher before layer, and what we're going to do is actually select him by using different selection tools to select the edge of the guy, and we won't have any of his background in the shot. We'll just have him selected perfectly. We can then add him to the main document and then move him around to position him so he doesn't overlap any of the other guys, and we don't see any of his background hiding people on the layers below. So to select this chap, we need to double click to unlock the layer, click OK, and then pop over here to grab the quick selection tool. You'll also find this tool in Photoshop Elements as well as in CS. Click to select that. You can choose a brush size of 33 or so, and then what we're going to do is just click and start to add the guy to the selection by spraying over him. This is quite an intelligent tool, so it's going to try and work out which bits you want to keep. Just by clicking and spraying, it's going to try and look at the contrast and color changes, and it's going to try and make an effective selection. It won't be perfect first time, so what you might need to do is modify the selection, and I'll show you how to do that in just a tick. Once you've started to click and spray, you'll see this icon's changing to the Add to Selection option. So click and spray to get as much of the hand as possible to the selection. If you press Ctrl and plus, you can zoom in for a closer look at these fiddly fingers and then just click and drag over them to add them to the selection. But you'll notice as well there's lots of motion blur around here, so it's going to be really tricky to add that motion blur using this particular selection tool, which is why we're going to need to refine the edge to include these soft, delicate details that are actually appearing as motion blur. But I'll show you how to do that in just a tick. Let me just hit spacebar down to have a look at the rest of the shot. And I'll also show you how to subtract bits from the selection to make it perfect. Let's just click and select the leg. It won't be perfect again. This is just a rough and ready tool to start our initial selection attack. There we go, it's making a quick selection there. But what I'm going to do is just get the shoulder as much as I can. And these areas here are going to be really difficult to select using this tool as well. So I'm going to show you how to use Refine Edge to add these to the selection. But you'll notice there's bits that have been added that we don't want, like this bit in here. So what I'm going to do is click Subtract from Selection, click and spray just to try and reduce that area there. I'm also going to then hit spacebar down once that's done the modification and try and remove these bits from the middle of the hands just to try and get as much as we can, like so. I've jumped forward in time a little bit just to fine tune the selection. If you find this middle bit gets selected, then grab the Subtract from Selection icon, just click and spray, and it should then find the fingers more effectively. You can then fine tune those if bits are missing by clicking the Add to Selection option and then trying to just tweak them like so. So it's a little bit fiddly. It's not going to be perfect, and you shouldn't expect it to be at this stage because we're going to refine things. We're also going to use layer masks later on to refine things too. So we're using a combination of different selection tools to select this guy from the scene. So after a bit of adding and subtracting, you should have something that looks like this. Don't worry too much if bits of background are still added to the selection. We can fine tune that later with the layer masks. But first of all, we're going to concentrate on getting a smoother edge to our selection. And to do that, we need to go to Refine Edge at the top. So click here, and up pops the Refine Edge window. You can see a kind of layer mask effect. It's very jaggy and rough and ready. Let's have a look at that in color by going to On White, double click, and there you can see that the guy has been selected against a white background, and that gives you an idea of bits of background that are still showing through from the original image. Now the cool thing about Refine Edge is it's got an edge detection option. If we turn on Smart Radius and increase this to around about 3.7, it will then look around the edge and try and automatically include the guy and isolate him from the background. So you should get a smoother selection just by clicking on here. But the other cool tool is this one here. If you click and select the Refine Radius tool, you can then Control plus to zoom in and have a look at areas like the guy's hair. Let me just hit spacebar to move on to that position. And if we set the size to around about 35 and click and spray, we should then be able to add the hair to the selection in a more effective way, just by spraying around the edge like so. If you go to the mask, you can see it's changed there now. If we go to the black mask by going to black and white, now you can see some more of these spiky hairs being selected, so that should give us a semi-transparent selection here and show the hairs but less of the background. So that's quite a powerful way of modifying things. Let me just spacebar again and go to these hands, because at the moment they're very sharp, but if we actually start to spray around them more effectively, we should start to get some of that motion blur from the actual layer itself, and that will then give us a much more effective selection. So again, spray around the edge like so, and then we'll begin to get those blurred fingers. Don't go too far into the fingers, just go around the edge of them a wee bit like so. And this is a cool way of modifying your selection. If we then go to another view like On White, back to here again, double click, you can see that some of that motion blur is now being added to the selection. Now if you find that the edge selection looks a little bit too jaggy, you can always change the tool to the Erase Refinements tool and click and spray to remove any areas that have been added like so, and that's just a nice way of tidying things up. You can also smooth things out a little bit using the smooth slider. If we take that to the right a little bit, you can see that after a bit of a think, it's smoothing out this selection and smoothing out the blur as well. It's worth adding a feather of around about 1.4 or so. That gives you a slightly softer edge, and that helps it blend more with the background pixels once you've added it. So we've improved that selection now by tweaking the edge detection options using Smart Radius and the Refine Radius tool. We can now create a layer mask based on this particular edit by going down to Selection and changing that to New Layer with Layer Mask. If you click on here, click OK, then you will get a layer mask added to the guy, so we can then modify that layer mask and improve things even more to make the selection perfect. But this is really the important bit, getting the hair to be selected and then added like so. Now the cool thing about having a layer mask is we can refine it by spraying black or white brush tips on it. So grab the brush tool, choose a nice soft edge brush, set size to 50, and then click on the mask. Make sure the foreground colour is black when you're on the mask, and then you can hide things you don't want, like bits of tree that are showing up from the background. In fact, if we click and hold the Shift key down, we can draw a straight line between the 2 points and create a tidier edit. I'm going to do that here as well, just to get rid of that fizzy bit, like so. And that just tidies things up quite nicely. We can then move around and have a look at the rest of the shot as well. If there's bits here that we don't want, just spray over them. Again, a nice soft edge brush should give you a nice gentle blend between the cricketer and the transparent background, and fine-tune things using a black brush to hide things, or if there's anything missing you could always use a white brush to try and add it as well, if there's bits of fingers for example that aren't visible. But it's done quite a good job of refining the blur here. We've actually got some semi-transparent bits. Let me just alt click and you can see that white is solid, black is transparent, and grey gives you a semi-transparent mix, which is very good for things like the hair and the motion blurred fingers. Click back here and we're now ready to add this to the main project. Now I could right click and apply the layer mask. Alternatively, if I go up to here and change view to side by side, we can see both documents open, and I can just drag the cricketer and his mask onto the main project. And it's quite useful to keep the mask intact because you can then edit it later. So click here, then go back to this single view, and what I'm going to do is grab the move tool, click on the cricketer, and I'm going to position him so that he's in the right place in the frame to then not block out anybody else. But now you can see there's no detail overlapping the background chaps. Let me just zoom in and have a look at the motion blur on the fingers. That's pretty good, and the hair as well is looking much better than you just get using the quick selection tool. You do need to refine it to get this delicate hair detail intact. The only element that's missing is the ball, so open original ball, grab the elliptical marquee tool, and then just set feather to 10 for a nice soft edge. If you alt click in the middle here, you can draw from that central point, hold shift to constrain the selection, and then when you've got it roughly in place, use the up and down arrow keys to fine tune the position, and then Control C to copy the ball, Control Tab to go to your main document, and Control V to paste the ball in. You can then use the move tool to reposition it, Control T gives you the free transform tool. You can then transform the width and the height to 186%. Let me just hit return for the width. Do the same for the heights. 186, and that gives us a much larger ball. Drag outside the ball for a more dramatic angle. Hit return to apply the change, and then fine tune the position with the move tool. Now to capture the ball without breaking the camera, we threw it into the air, so it's not moving in the right direction or at the right speed. So target the ball layer, and then go to filter, go to blur, choose motion blur, and you can then choose a value of 51 for distance, an angle of -77 for the direction, and click OK, and now it's moving at a much greater lick. And as a finishing touch, we're going to add a levels adjustment layer by clicking down here and choosing levels. Make sure you drag the levels adjustment layer below the catcher and the ball, and then what we're going to do is darken things by dragging the midtone slider to the right to 0.7 or so. That should do the trick. And then we need to selectively darken the sky by using a gradient on the mask here. So click on the mask, grab the gradient tool, make sure that we've got a nice foreground to background preset, click OK, and then if you draw from the bottom up to the top on the mask with a black foreground to a white background, you should get a nice gradient that's darkening at the top there but becoming lighter at the bottom. Let me turn that on and off to show you the difference. There you go, so the sky is now darkened as if we were using a graduated filter on the camera lens. So to create our cricketing composite, we took separate source files of the guy in different positions and then pasted them into a new document, and then used layer masks to hide most of the layer, but used a white brush to reveal the guy in certain parts of the scene so we could hide him or show him with ease. We then used a selection tool to select our main chap and then refined the selection and used a much more complex layer mask to remove all of his background so it wouldn't overlap any of the guys in the background. And finally, we added the ball, put a bit of motion blur on it, and there is our final cricketing composite. How's that?